Perfect. And I switch off my mic.
Very welcome to the 9th webinars of our series of Hub Talks, the citizen-centric EHR data sharing for care and research, the industry perspective. The WHO Global Strategy on Digital Health advocates for people-centered health systems that are enabled by digital health, which makes emphasis on placing people at the center of digital health through the adoption and use of digital health technologies in scaling up and strengthening health service delivery. In this regard, enable citizen-centric HR data sharing is important in order to integrate protocols and exchange data between healthcare providers, researchers, citizens, and the industry. So the individual is an essential component in the delivery of trust-based people-centered care. And I would like to take the opportunity to call for countries and the stakeholders to move away from the current disease-focused systems to an integrated approach with the patient at the center. The WHO Global Strategy on Digital Health also focuses on strengthening the governance of digital health at national and international levels. And actions to strengthen the governance should include defining principles and reaching cross-sectoral and international agreements for data sharing, quality and accuracy of health data, and prioritization of investment plans and policy for being able to agree on a global appropriate use of health data and on concepts such as health data as a global public good, and to outline principles of equitable data sharing, principles for research, consistent metadata and definitions, besides artificial intelligence and data analytics and primary and secondary use of data. So with no more delay, I give the floor to our excellent speakers of this webinar and representatives of the healthcare and technology industry, which will present expert information and debate about the adoption of citizen-centric health data solutions and the potential integration of patient-generated and machine-generated data, but by digital therapeutics. Thank you very much.
Francesco, you can continue.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm Francesco Torelli. I'm a research engineer and Ingegneria Informatica, a big Italian company that work also in the healthcare domain. And I'm the technical leader of InteropEHRate, a research and innovation action started at the beginning of 2019. Tino, yes. The project will end this year in September. And you can see from the slide, 16 partners are involved among healthcare providers, university, and industrial companies like engineering. Next slide, please, Tino. Okay, the goal of the project is to support the cross and in-border exchange of health data between citizen and healthcare organizations, or between citizen and research organization. Next slide, please. The goal of InteropEHRate is to move from the current situation to a new situation where citizens will be peers of healthcare and research organization. In the current approach for healthcare data exchange, for health data exchange, the exchange of data mainly happens by means of the mediations of electronic health records. Basically, we have a national or regional electronic health records, or sometimes the electronic health records are just within the hospitals. The situation depends from the specific context. In any case, the health data are stored within these central system, within these EHRs. And then the consumer of the data obtains the health data from these systems. So both the citizen and other healthcare providers, or also the research organizations, needs to receive the health data from these systems. In our vision, the exchange of health data will be mediated also by the citizen. So our approach is both more decentralized and citizen-centered. The idea is that the health data will be stored also on the mobile devices of the citizens. The citizen will move using these mobile devices with their health data from one place to another, for example, from one country to another country, and the exchange of health data will be mediated by the citizens themselves. So the consumer of the health data will receive the personal health data of the citizen directly from the mobile device of the citizen, without the need to contacting any cloud systems like an EHR system. The two approaches are actually complementary. We don't want to move completely from one picture to the other, but the idea is to complement the two approaches. In order to realize this vision, InteropEHRate defines 5 different communication protocols that are intended to support different use cases. Probably the most peculiar communication protocol is the D2D protocol, that means device to device. This protocol is so called because the exchange of data happens without the usage of the internet, but just using the Bluetooth protocol. It's a peer-to-peer protocol for the exchange of health data directly between the mobile device of the citizen and the device used by the healthcare professionals. Then we have other 3 protocols that are called R2D, that means remote to device, that are intended to cover other needs. For example, the possibility to access the health data remotely, and this is done by the R2D access protocol. Another protocol that is called R2D backup allows to allow the citizen to back up the health data on personal cloud systems, so the citizen can choose his preferred cloud services to store in an encrypted format his own personal health data. The protocol is a particular protocol because the cloud provider have no possibility to decrypt the data because the encryption key is owned just by the citizen. And then we have a third protocol for remote exchange that is called R2D emergency, that allows the healthcare providers to access also to the health data stored on the personal cloud service of the cloud storage of the citizen in case of emergency. And finally, we have another protocol that is called the research data sharing protocol, that is intended for allowing the exchange of health data between the citizen and the research organization, so for the purpose of research studies. Next slide, please, Tino. In this presentation, I will talk just of the D2D protocol and the RDS protocol. So, as I was saying before, the D2D protocol is a Bluetooth protocol for the exchange of health data. So this protocol is used when the healthcare professionals and the patients are in a face-to-face situation, for example, during a medical visit. So we can imagine, for example, a patient that is temporarily in a foreign country, and for some reason he needs to receive a medical visit in this other country. So he needs to give access to his own health data to the healthcare professionals of this other country. Next slide, please, Tino. There is some delay. Okay. In this protocol, we have basically two applications that are involved. One application is called SER, that means Smart EHR. A Smart EHR is any mobile applications that is fully under the citizen control, that is able to store the personal data of the citizen directly on the smart device, for example, a mobile device of the citizen, and is an application that is able to support the 5 communication protocols defined by Interoperate. Other than supporting these communication protocols, this kind of application must satisfy a set of privacy and security constraints defined by our project. So a Smart EHR is not a specific mobile application, but can be any kind of mobile application developed by different companies that satisfy these constraints. EHRapp application in this scenario is able to exchange data with an application used by an healthcare professional. We call it AZP app. For us, an AZP app is any application used by an healthcare professional that is able to support just the D2D protocol without any other constraint. The exchange of data, as I said, happens using the Bluetooth protocol, and the data are represented using the HL7 FHIR data model. This slide shows more simply how the protocol works. In the first step, a connection is established between the mobile device of the citizen and the AZP application. The AZP shows to the citizen a QR code that allows the mobile application of the citizen to connect just to the specific workstation of that specific AZP. The citizen can see from the mobile application the demographic data of the AZP and can give his consent to the connection. Next slide, Tino. So after the consent, the digital consent provided by the citizen, the healthcare professional can download any health data that is stored on the mobile application of the citizen. Next slide. Okay, a few words on the RDS protocol. The RDS protocol, as I was saying before, is used for exchanging health data with research organizations. Differently from the previous protocol, this is an internet-based protocol. The idea is that both the citizens and the research organizations participate to a network that is called the Open Research Network. Thanks to these networks, the researchers are able to invite any citizen that participates to the network to participate to new research study and to receive health data directly from the mobile devices of the citizens that decides to participate to the research studies proposed by the research organization. The exchange of health data happens using a common vocabulary that is defined by our project, that of course is based on current standard, mainly long vocabularies and ICD-10 terminologies. So it is possible for all the research organization to understand the data using these common vocabularies. Next slide, please, Tino. Okay, in this case, we have mainly three parties that participate in the exchange of health data. First of all the research organizations publish a description of their research study on a central node. So we have a special node in this network that stores in a machine understandable format a description of the research studies that the research organization wants to perform. The mobile devices of the patients are able to download this description of the research studies from the central node. These these research definition documents includes a description of the enrollment criteria of the patients, so the mobile application can check if the citizen can be enrolled as a potential participant to this research study. And in this case, if there is a matching, proposed to the citizen to participate to the research study, if the citizen accepts, the mobile application will start to exchange data with the research organization. Within the research organization, specific electronic services are installed that are called Interoperate research services that are based on our protocol, just to receive the health data from the mobile device. Next slide. So this slide just summarizes the steps that I just said. So the protocol supports mainly 6 main steps. With the first step, the citizen can accept to participate to the open research network. The second step is the download of the RDD documents from the central node. That is the nodes that store the description of the research study. As I said, the mobile device can retrieve these research studies from the description of these research studies from the central node. In any case, the citizen can withdraw from any research study in any moment and can decide also to opt out entirely from the open research network. Next slide, please, Tino. Just a few details on the main 2 steps. As I said, when the mobile application download the description of the research study from the central node, the mobile device silently match the enrollment criteria that are stored within the research description document with the health data that are stored on the mobile device. This matching happens without exchanging any health data with the research organization. So it happens just within the mobile device of the citizen. Just in case the citizen decides to participate to the research study, and of course, in case there is a positive matching, the health data of the citizen starts to be exchanged with the research organization. Next slide, Tino. So if the citizen decides to participate, the data that are required by the research organizations are extracted from the mobile devices, are anonymized, and then sent in an encrypted format to a reference research center. The reference research center is chosen by the citizen when he decides to participate to the research study. So the citizen has the possibility to choose a research center that is more suitable to him, for example, because it is nearest to his own. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the final slide. So I described just a little bit of just 2 protocols of Interoperate. As I said, the project define other 3 communication protocols. The idea is to have this decentralized approach. So we have different, several advantages. Some of the advantages are mainly related to the usage of this decentralized approach, and other advantages are related to our specific protocol. So related with the reference to the central approach in general, the advantage are that, first of all, the citizen can maintain and can their health data on their mobile device, so they can access to this data also when they are offline. The exchange of health data happens in a peer-to-peer way in some protocol like the D2D using just Bluetooth. So the exchange of data is more private and gives more control to the citizen, because it is the citizen that decide if and when to exchange health data with other parties. And thanks to the RDS protocol, there is also the possibility for research organization to obtain more data, because there is the possibility to contact directly the citizen. Then there are a set of advantages that are related to our protocols, or to our specific protocols. First of all, these are open protocols, so every organization, every developer, and every research or healthcare organization can implement it. So this avoids the blocking of data within silos. Using one of the other protocols, that is the R2D access protocol, the citizen can receive a copy of health data also from foreign countries, also when the citizen is not present in that country. I have to mention that the identification of the data in the remote protocols happens using the ADAS standard. So the citizen can log in with the same account across different countries and service providers without the need to create a new account for any hospital or any healthcare provider. And as I was said, we use a common vocabulary, and we use the FHIR standard. More specifically, we defined a set or FHIR-based profiles. These allow, for example, to translate the same data in different language. Another important aspect of our protocols is that all the data are digitally signed, and the provenance of these of all the data is certified by this digital signature. That's all.
Thank you very much, Francesco. In complementing the presentation of Francesco, we have invited also Vincent Cannon, and we have to thank Vincent to join us today, because we know that you are in a completely different time zone and it's very early in the morning for you. So thank you, Vincent, for joining this webinar, and please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Tino. Do you hear me correctly?
Perfectly.
Yeah. So hi, everybody. Yeah, hi from San Francisco. I'm sending a little bit of sun to you. I'm lucky to be here for this week. Yeah. So I'm going to show you talk a bit more about the Smart EHR part, which is the software that runs on the patient's smartphone. So in the context of this project, what is a smart electronic health record, apart from what Francesco already described? It's a mobile application that is running on the patient's smartphone, and that is storing health data. It's storing data on the smartphone, which is probably a bit unusual to you, but it's a new tendency. It's sometimes called edge storage, edge computing, and so on, meaning it's at the edge of the internet. It's not on central servers. Why do we do that here? It's a complementary to existing system, right? It doesn't need to replace existing system, but it's a way for patients to have access to their data all of the time, even when there is no internet connection. And you know that, for example, when you go to a hospital, sometimes you don't have access to internet when you are in the hospital because of the walls and because of radiography machines and so on. So it's not always easy, but also when you are abroad. right? You don't always have access to internet all the time. So with the storage of data on your smartphone, you always have access to your data. Also for security and privacy reasons, this is probably much stronger because, well, privacy, if you store your data in the cloud on a server, you have to make sure that the cloud providers do not have access to your data, which is always a challenge, right? And also for security reasons, because if there is a cloud provider with hundreds of thousands or millions of health records, is going to be probably the target of many hackers that will try to have access to those data, which have a lot of value to be restored. So that's why we took that approach. And I'm going to now show a bit more of Enderman 7. What is Enderman? It's a mobile application developed by our company, and it serves as a reference implementation. Reference implementations means all the protocols that Francesco described have been developed, and we want to show that they are well designed and that they do work in practice, right? So it's not just theory, it's not just recommendation. These are very concrete protocols that can really be used in practice. So that's why Enderman has implemented all those protocols in the mobile application. So it's an extension to what we had. And it serves as a proof, if you want, that the protocols are well designed and can be implemented by others, right? So the protocols are not proprietary at all. They are open for anyone to implement. So in this case, it would be competitors to Enderman 7 and other players. But so quickly, what Enderman 7 is outside of these protocols from InteropEHRate, it's a full PHR, meaning personal health record. So as opposed to EHR, electronic health record, or EMR, electronic medical records, that are software used by hospitals and doctors to manage the health of patients, a PHR is a tool for patients themselves to manage their own health data. As you can see on the picture on the right, you have areas where you can enter the drugs you are taking, the allergies that you have, your blood type, past medical conditions, and just about everything about your health. It's good for the patients to enter that, but it's also very useful if you can connect to your hospital or your lab and get the results directly sent to you to your mobile phones. Here, I can announce that we are compatible with more than 10,000 USA hospitals. So that's 85% of the US market. Unfortunately, in Europe, we have a huge problem, which is interoperability. That, of course, we try to address with protocols like InteropEHRate. But today, there is a very, very big problem for interoperability in Europe. It's very hard to get your data and to communicate between hospitals of different countries and so on. Besides this PHR and connectivity, we also added a number of research features. So the capabilities for patients to consent to research studies. ePro means patient-reported outcomes, and ECRF is clinical research form. These are two technical terms that I use for clinical trials. So that's basically questionnaire that a sponsor is sending to patients to collect data. There is treatment adherence also. That means either drugs or medical devices with alerts, reminders to take your drug at the appropriate time, and adverse event reporting and those kind of things. So it's a combination of a tool for patients and also a tool for hospitals and for research. I must say that for personal reason, we decided to have a social project in Enderman. So that means that everything for the patients is free. Patients can go to the App Store on Google or Apple and download the application for free and manage their own data. And there is absolutely no use of the data of patients by anybody, right? It's completely private. So it's not the same as Google, Facebook, and so on that are using your data. This is not the case. The project is financed by hospitals or research industry that are paying us to do projects with the patients, and then all of that is what allows us to have that social part. Where are we active? Well, mainly in Europe and the US for the moment, but we are very open to other areas. We are discussing projects in Africa and South America, for example, but it's new for us. What is already interesting is that we support many languages, the 20 most spoken languages on Earth. Of course, English and most European languages, but also difficult languages, at least for European people, Chinese, Japanese, Hindi, Russian, Arabic, and so on. So you can move to the next slide, Tino, thank you. So this is a little bit how it works. On the left side, you see the patients. They all have a small database on their smartphone inside Enderman 7, and they have the key to that. It's locked, right? On the right side, you have all the possible player or stakeholders. So you have in blue what I call the care players, so doctors, hospitals, nurses, physiotherapists, any kind of person that is caring for patients as a profession. Then in green, you have everything about medical research. So that includes pharma companies, biotechs, academic research by hospitals, of course, medical device manufacturers, all of these that need to evaluate new treatments. So do clinical research, clinical trials, and those. And I put in red potential new players in the future that would be focused, for example, on prevention, education of patients, and so on. And as you can see in the middle, there is no server, no storage, right? So Enderman is just a gateway to patients, like the two icons on the bottom show. There is no central storage, and there is no storage in the cloud. Everything is on the left side, on patient smartphone, and or on the right side, so in hospital servers or research stakeholders. Next slide. So who can use Enderman 7 and for what kind of use cases? The triangle on the right side shows that we like to divide the medical world or the healthcare world in three parts. One is the patients in green, and we want to empower patients, as you understand now, by giving them access to all of the health data and sharing that with whoever they want. The patients decide, and the patient need to consent every time. In orange, it's more about the research industry that I just mentioned. So that is academic research, as I said, hospital, pharma, biotechs, and to run clinical trials. And in blue, it's everything about caring of patient, especially remote caring, so telemedicine and so on. We do not offer tele-video, for example, but there are a number of companies that do that, but we connect to those and we are able to add the data management layer, if you want, to those systems. So these are the three main categories of stakeholders. Next slide. And now to make the link with the Interoperate protocol, what does Enderman do there? Well, we implement all the protocols, as I said, to show that they work. And what are the benefits for an application like us? And what would be the benefits for our competitors or other type of industrial players to implement the Interoperate protocols? Well, there are many. First, we improve interoperability. You know that interoperability between hospitals and so on is a big problem in Europe today because there is no one that is imposing that. Contrary to the US, I would say that a few years ago, Europe was well positioned, but in the last 2-3 years, we have lost a lot of benefits because the US have been moving very fast, imposed initially by Obama and then has been continued. So all hospitals are obliged to use software that are open to interoperability. We don't have that in Europe, unfortunately, and that's really hurting Europe. That's hurting European patients first, right? And then the industry that is trying to innovate. So Interoperate has a nice way to approach the interoperability by going through patients, right? So instead of trying to put system at the national level, which is good, right? And it's something we should continue doing, we propose a second approach that can be done in parallel, which is to implement the Interoperate protocols between a patient and the hospital. So the patients download their data, and for example, they could upload their data to another hospital, or they could communicate directly with the peer-to-peer or the device-to-device protocol that Francesco mentioned earlier. In this case, it's really the phone of the patient talking with Bluetooth to the computer, for example, the desktop computer of the doctor, and there is a direct exchange of the information there without all the heavy infrastructure that will be needed for one day. But at least it's a start. So this is the first and the second point. Of course, you must guess that the other protocols that Francesco mentioned, like the backup online, like the emergency protocol, of course, these are very useful for a mobile application like Enderman. And to finally address the research part, I told you earlier that Enderman has a number of features for research, like electronic forms and consenting and things like that. But one big thing that is added via the Interoperate protocol is patient recruitment on a large scale, but without sharing data. If you remember Francesco's presentation, the first part was how do we find the correct patients? For example, I want to run a study for a new drug for prostate cancer, and I want to find men over 50 years old with a prostate cancer. How can I find these patients without sharing too much of their data? So everything that Francesco explained earlier allows us to distribute the criteria for research to the phones of patients. No data is shared, right? The data stays on the phone. And if there is a match with the inclusion-exclusion criteria, then that patient is proposed, is offered to contribute to the clinical trial. And then, of course, then there is another consent for that specific trial where, of course, data will be shared. Some data from the health record, not all usually, and then data from questionnaires and so on. So that's a very good way to do large-scale research while preserving privacy, which, as you know, is very important in Europe. I think this is my last slide. Yeah, sorry. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Now, I think if there is some burning questions, we can take it at the moment. I saw some on the chat flowing. I will stop sharing for a second.
Just one quick, Tino, just one quick question that I would spot for probably for Vincent. What is the size of the virtual database that is needed on the smartphone for storing the data?
It's actually extremely small. Of course, if you exclude images, there's a special case of images, but a health record, which is mainly based on text documents and data elements, is much smaller than your music database or your pictures, your photos, right? So on my smartphone, I have all of my family's records, so mine, my children, and also demo records, and it's a very small part. It's a bit different for images, right? But then you have two types of images. You have the high resolution images, which are huge, right? They are even big for a classic computer. So this is a different situation. But the thing is that in practice, for patients and for most doctors, so that excludes radiologists need high resolution images, of course, right? So if you want to have a second advice on the same image, then you need the high resolution images. But for all the rest, for the family doctor and for all of these, they really don't need the image, because what they need is the text of the specialist. So the radiologist is looking at the images and then he's giving his recommendation, his analysis. And that is what is important for the patient and for the family doctor and potentially other specialists other than radiologists. So images are a special case, but are not really critical for these use cases, I would say.
Thank you.
Anyway, there is ways to exchange. There are ways to exchange images, right? We Interoperate supports that, right? So we can do it, but then there is a storage limitation on the phones normally for images.
Perfect. So I think it's time for the debate. We are pleased to invite the expert panelists from different areas of the industry. We have the honor of having Giedre Kvedaraviciene from COCIR, if I pronounce it properly. We have also Michael Strübin from Medtech Europe. I encourage to open your cameras. Also Maritta Perälä-Heape from University of Oulu, representing the innovation ecosystem, and Andrea Buccoliero from GPI, tech company based in Italy. So thank you for joining us today in this webinar. We have heard from Francesco, from Vincent, that the approach that InteropEHRate is addressing is complementary to the traditional healthcare center approach based on the ability of citizens of sharing data, and the protocols are enabling this data sharing. I would like to ask first to Giedre how the industry is envisaging this transformation, or this switch from a centralized approach to a decentralized approach where the citizens have more capacity of owning and sharing their data. Giedre.
Thank you very much, Tino, for allowing me to start this panel discussion and express industry views on that. So first of all, of course, as it was mentioned many times today already, interoperability in mHealth, is key, and it must rely on open standards. But also Vincent was stating in his presentation, but despite the potential competitiveness of entering and producing similar solutions, it's a key of opening this data sharing and making a really citizen-centric approach not a concept but a reality. What is important, I guess, to stress here that in order to make it true, collaboration with all related stakeholders on steering this mHealth interoperability, both in individual EU members and across the states, is very critical. And rules must be set for stakeholder engagement in order, to have a concise and integrated development of this process. And then finally, what I guess wasn't touched very much by both presentations, but is one of the key obstacles, is identification of needed organizational and policy changes, which have to be, readjusted to deploy and foster this implementation of mobile health sharing. So probably to end that, what I would also say that literacy of all the stakeholders and understanding of technologies, willingness to use them and share that data is something that stands behind, and before all of that is done, the technological solutions alone are unfortunately not enough to really implement this citizen-centric approach in practical world. So that would be my brief comment.
Thank you, Giedre. I would like to hear from Michael Strübin from Medtech Europe, the position of the industry. We have heard about the potential connection of the Smart EHR with medical devices. How is the industry envisaging this new ecosystem of data sharing?
Hi, we're definitely in favor of an ecosystem where mHealth devices and solutions can connect, and where patients have full control over their data. We're far away from this. I completely agree with the diagnosis that some of you have mentioned, and I think we can probably all agree that this is something that we really need to overcome. I have two questions really, and that is since the beginning of the project, I think the European Commission and member states have increasingly moved towards building national or European health data spaces, and of course we're in the Brussels bubble, are very much in anticipation of the relevant legislation, and I would like to hear whether the protocols that have been developed by InteropEHRate also foresee that kind of overarching superstructure, and how that would tie into this emerging data ecosystem, where of course the Commission wants to create a data ecosystem for research and innovation. And I think the other observation that I have is that some of the member states are currently, I'm thinking about the Austrian ELGA system, the German EPA system, or so, building what they call citizen-centric electronic health record systems, and where and who would be the audience, who would be the people to adopt the InteropEHRate protocols? What's the strategy for them to approach them? Because the landscape is shifting a little bit. Vincent, you said earlier that nobody is imposing interoperability. I think that's changing. We're seeing a number of national and regional initiatives to actually require data, to set standards, to ask to develop specifications. It would be great if they could, for industry, it would be great if they could agree on a standard or on a protocol like InteropEHRate. We in our industry would be very keen to find something that they could comply with. That's not just for one region, one member state, but would be valid across Europe. How, and maybe ideally globally. So what's the strategy? What are your plans to reach those kinds of audiences? Because the medical technology industry is committed to delivering devices, and solutions and technologies that meet the highest levels of safety and requirements. Our industry delivers technologies that the market demands at the state-of-the-art technology. But ultimately, our member companies deliver the devices that the market demands. Now that the market slowly begins to, that the buyers slowly begin to require interoperability, we're really keen to see that the market doesn't fragment. So those would be my comments here initially, and looking forward to the discussion.
I can pass this question to Francesco, maybe in terms of discussions with the European Commission regarding InteropEHRate.
Okay, I would stress first of all that according to the GDPR, the citizen have the right to have an electronic access to their data. So we can imagine that in the next years, the different European countries will try to realize this right. The point is that there is the risk that every country give this access in a different way. So with these InteropEHRate protocols, we are trying to propose a standard for homogenize the different implementation from the different countries. We are convinced that the approach for realizing this interoperability should follow different and complementary strategies. First of all, we think that the private companies, in particular the developers of healthcare application, should try to join and agree among them in order to start to realize the interoperability already independently from the commitment of the European institutions. And this is, for example, what we are trying to do in Italy. For example, we plan to try to exploit also the IP-CAI projects for convincing different both Italian and European countries to start to use this kind of protocol for exchanging data with the citizens. You asked also what is, Michael, what could be should be the relationship with respect to data space. We think that is important that in all the European institutions start to think to the role of the citizens within data spaces. Often the discussion is related just to the exchange of data among different companies, public or private companies. We need to think better about the role of the citizen. So we think that both data providers and citizens should participate to the data space. So they should be considered both provider and consumers of this data. So we should not assume that the provider of the data are just big or little organizations, but should be also single citizens. So we need to pay attention to include in the future specification for this common European data space also protocols like the ones of InteropEHRate to allow the exchange of data also directly with the citizen. So our idea is that citizens should participate to the data spaces as peers of the other organizations and as peers of the data consumers. And of course, everyone recognizes the importance of the citizen for giving consent to the usage of the data. But in our opinion, the role of the citizen should not be just to give the consent. The role of the citizen should to have a more active role in this exchange of data. And first of all, it should be allowed to maintain his own copy of the data without depending necessarily from other organizations. Of course, the citizen should have also the freedom to be assisted to have the services of private and public companies, but this should not be the only option for the citizen.
Thank you, Francesco. I see a couple of hands up, but I would like to hear from Maritta in representation of the research domain, but also the digital health innovation hubs, and especially for these characteristics that were explained related to research. How do you see this approach, this decentralized approach to spur innovation and research?
Thank you, Tino. And I have to say that I'm so impressed about the solution that you have been working on. As it is myself, I have been working on my data initiatives and globally that we could get the human-centric data management in place so that people are in the center of their healthcare. And at the same time, looking at the opportunities that we could empower people to take care of themselves. And now these solutions that you have here has a huge opportunity, in fact, to collect real-world data in the population level even, and which we haven't really addressed yet too much, and invite people, even the population studies. I would see that in the next generation of your solution. And as it is that it was also mentioned that what are the future opportunities when we have access to data and people can be managing their own data, sharing the data with the researchers, I'm sure that we could build up on new preventive healthcare services in prediction, especially, meaning that all the digital therapeutic applications which are all the time providing more and more digital data of people, it's a valuable asset in the future, I would say. But we are not using that data enough, even when we are planning the new interventions, for example, for citizens. So I'm really happy to see that how we could scale this up, and of course seeing also Finland in your map, which was in fact missing from your project, but willing to see that what are the next opportunities while we are now building also here in Oulu Health ecosystem, the new environment, how we could exchange and share data between different stakeholders. So we are really open for that collaboration and discussions. And also nationally, we want to, of course, see that this type of solutions would be in place here in Finland as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Maritta. And I would like to give the floor to Andrea from GPI. Also, the perspective of a health IT company of these interoperate protocols, but also the possibilities of using Smart EHRs as a connecting platform for research and care. Andrea, please.
First of all, I would like to say that I'm not happy to hear from you the same urgency for more interoperable ecosystem, because it means that we still have a lot to do before getting this objective. So this is the first common thing I listen to within each of the talk that were before me. We are facing the same problems regarding interoperability and integration from two different perspectives. On the one side, by being a provider of a digital solution, so we have this modular architecture which provide different features and functionalities to the digital care itself. We always have to cope or to face somehow the problem that was already before mentioned, the fact that each hospital has its own, for example, system. But it is even worse because many times within each hospital we have more than one systems. So the problem is even it's even worse if we have to admit it. On the other side, as R&D department, we are also focusing on, in general, investigating what is the population health. In order to be able to investigate in this way, we have to take account all of the possible features that impact on a patient health. And in fact, we are focusing on developing data lakes that enable the training and the development of new agents that may be useful for different directions. Again, in order to be able to properly create, for example, this sort of data lakes, we have to solve the interoperable issue unless we are not able to deliver any of this innovative solution. So again, the perspective you pointed out before is really similar to ours, and it is a pleasure to see this kind of protocols that try to focus on giving the power to the patient for unlocking the potential of data. And again, as before said by Francesco, we are also working on the EPCA framework project in Europe, and I think that this may be maybe one of the contact points among the European project we are going to propose. Because just if we act together as associated stakeholders to the system, we can reach what Vincent was saying before, a sort of imposed infrastructure that enables a real interoperable ecosystem.
Thank you, Andrea.
So
I think, Giedre, you wanted to intervene, and then I will pass the floor to Mark Lange for the final part of the session.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I wanted just to make a brief comment. It was said that, you know, patients are excluded from the general understanding and the sharing between private and public companies. So from industry perspective, patients are always centric. And what is important to kind of highlight in this case that we're talking about healthcare, which is a very specific field, highly regulated, with specifically allocated liabilities and you know, patient safety rules, which was also mentioned by my colleague. So all those things, they deeply embed both the values and responsibilities allocation and the structures which support those things. And unfortunately, up until now, you know, the patient wasn't really given the power. It was all fully allocated with the clinicians for healthcare decisions to be made. And those changes, they need those structural shifts, which I was mentioning, you know, to accommodate the shifting views of the society of the role of a patient. So this empowering patients is not only about the technology, but there are a lot of underlying things which have to be taken care of and adjusted so that the technologies can enable the patient in the reality. Because practically, from industrial point of view, the technologies are available, and they are available to an extent where the concept of so what influences health and those health links, which were mentioned now, right? They can already be used. What is important to say that it's not enough to pull the data or to give it to the patient, but also make it meaningful, which again means applying certain technologies such as artificial intelligence, which could assist professionals and the citizen who is holding the information to make informed decisions, educated decisions. So yes, that's, I guess, what I wanted to say, you know, that the patients are centric, but the moves which we have to make are quite tectonic for those implementations to start taking place. But with all the, even from regulative perspective, with all the, you know, regulations which are now under the discussion and will be hopefully implemented by the end of the year, definitely patients become very centric, especially when if you, for example, take the Data Act, which is going to be published, it's a lot about making those changes enactable, and I'm pretty sure that very soon we will see those changes in the European market that we're discussing today.
Thank you, Giedre. Indeed, a double challenge, not only technological but social too. I'm pleased to hand over to Mark for the last part of the session. Mark, please. Go.
Thank you. Dear friends, I guess that you are also as frustrated as I am. I would have loved to continue the discussion, but time flies, and for some, the day is starting, Vincent, but for others, the day is closing, and we need to, and we cannot retain you too much. So that's really the frustration that I have today. I think that we really touch now with the industry, and that's really an element that is important to highlight. We really touch now here this question of the market, this question of what the market needs, and the discussion on when will the market, even if you have policymakers who are pushing in certain direction their policies, when the market will be able to offer these opportunities to citizens to become an actor of the data sharing. So we only touch the surface of the topic, but we touch it with you, and I think that's an important point. And I do hope that we will be able to continue this conversation. by other means, there will be final conferences. There will be other opportunities to meet, organize webinars. So clearly, and also InteropEHRate will also have the opportunity to test these protocols with in a pilot environment with hospitals in Belgium, with hospitals in Italy, and in Romania. So that will also be an opportunity to hear about feedback and lessons to learn from that. So I think that's the way I would close it. So let's consider this, that this is the beginning of a discussion on the market and on the need and on how to prepare the market and how to drive the market in direction of enabling citizens to be in control of their data sharing. Thanks a lot for everyone to have been with us today, and we look forward to meet you virtually at least, but certainly sooner or later in person. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone.